Thank you, Deanna, Dylan, Kamala, and Ted Not Lasso. Great stuff. So this next session is very near and dear to my heart. I am fascinated and curious by all things AI. I literally host a podcast called AI Curious. This is right up my alley. And AI is, as we all know, is impacting virtually every industry except maybe like goat herding. And gaming is certainly an industry that's being massively impacted. In many ways positive, in some ways maybe questionable, and we'll get into that. What might have taken someone, a designer, 3 hours or 3 weeks to design using code, if they're trying to design some throne room and some dragon, they can now do that in like 3 seconds with AI, which is extremely exciting for games and also poses questions. So the moderator of this, for selfish reasons, will be me. I love this. And please join me with Ben James and Koji Nagata. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
So obviously, I'm super excited to get into this stuff with you, and I know there's kind of a million angles we can cover. Why don't we first get started with, can you each describe your projects and games and kind of give us a brief just tease of how you're injecting AI into that? Koji, kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, the project I'm probably best known for is Parallel, which is a digital TCG, but our next game that we're working on is called Colony, and it's basically a colony survival sim, except in that game, you're not the player, you are assigned an AI agent that's the player, and it's your job to build a relationship with this agent and help them navigate the world. And that's basically how we're using AI in our project.
Ben?
Yeah, we're a company that's essentially just building 3D generative AI technologies. So we're best known at Atlas for some of the larger virtual worlds we've done for people like Square Enix. And then now what's particularly interesting is we're starting to look at like a Web3 angle and a broader consumer generative 3D AI platform as well.
Cool. So let's get into the weeds a bit on the various kind of categories and buckets that AI can change game development and spark innovation, right? So here's my kind of clunky layman's perspective. I'm envisioning that, someone, they had to if they're trying to design some column of an old, design of like a building in a game layer, you can just say, cool, make me a column, make me a building, right? And so imagining that what would take months can now take hours. But it's a very kind of clumsy shorthand. Can you kind of flesh out a little more on the various ways that AI is quickening the timeline of games, and what are the most exciting kind of use cases for you guys?
I feel like you're the expert on that one, so maybe you.
Yeah, that was a perfect example for us. So that's really at Atlas what we're doing. So we see sometimes we're 200x faster. But what's interesting is that's seen by different demographics of the gaming industry in a different light. So if you're a large AAA studio, you'd be very interested in the efficiency gains you can get from that. If you're a mobile studio, you'll be very interested in how fast you can get to market or rapidly iterate over. And if you're a smaller indie studio, you'd be interested about the creative potentials that opens up. And I think that last one is probably the most interesting to me. But we meet a lot of game developers that have these ideas for huge open world games that would be impractical or impossible to build in a traditional way. But then Gen AI would allow that to be possible because of the gains you would get.
Koji?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the most general way, basically what it does, let me frame it this way. I look at it like back in the day when you wanted to build a website, you'd open up a text document, write down a bunch of HTML code, rename the text document HTML and throw it up on the internet, and then you had a website and it looked kind of like whatever. And now you can go to another website, design your entire website, set up payment rails, do all this stuff without needing to know how to do any of that stuff. And I think that AI is what's going to bring gaming to sort of the next level. All you need is a good idea and a slight ability to execute eventually. And then these tools will help bring you there, so you don't really need to spend years and years and years figuring out all the subtle nuances on how to make a game. You just need to have the fundamentals.
Ben already touched upon this a little bit, but what is AI surprisingly good at in game development? And then what have you found geez, I thought AI would be pretty good at this, and it's actually freaking lousy. What is AI kind of low-key bad at in this world?
I think what we see is that AI is really good at a lot of the banal, repetitive tasks that, to be honest, a lot of game developers or artists are not particularly interested in doing anyway. So UV mapping an asset, for example, is not a particularly exciting task. Where I think there is potential, so it's both good and bad. I think it shows surprising potential in its ability to be creative at moments, but creative within a certain basis that's augmenting the intuition of a designer. So I think on the one hand, that's what AI is also very bad at, is genuine new creativity that it's never seen before. But if you're a designer with some idea or framework to give the model, some data to train it on, it can be surprisingly creative.
Do you see that changing over time? Do you think eventually it will get to the point where you say, make me a badass game set in some fantasy realm, and it will actually think of good ideas, or will we always have to kind of guide it and kind of give it the spark of creativity?
I think we always need the creativity component. I personally think that, it will do more and more incredible, amazing things. But ultimately, it's the creative side of that is going to be what's driving it. And I think as it, like Koji talked about, lowers the barrier to entry for a lot of new people to come on and develop games, what's going to then distinguish games, whether they're made by AI or not, is fundamentally how creative and unique and interesting and aesthetic they are.
I'm going to go the other way on this one. I think that saying that it's not going to be able to do the creative secret sauce is just the human way of being like, no, we'll always be relevant. Don't worry. But ultimately, what we do, and our games are no different, is take the ideas from the things that we played before. I'll use our game as an example. The stuff in the card game, the stuff in Hearthstone, the stuff in Magic the Gathering, the stuff in Runeterra, and a bunch of other games that I play that no one's played. I took all of my favorite ideas and mashed them together, got rid of the stuff I didn't like, and here's a net new game, right? And that, there's creativity in there, but I think that it's something that I learned how to do. And I think it's something, if you can teach it, I think you could probably teach an AI to do it, and maybe we don't need that human secret sauce. I don't think we're remotely close to that, but I think if you're asking me at some point in the future, are they just gonna be able to do this? Of course they are.
Well, from a different perspective, when I played as a writer, when I play with things like ChatGPT, hey, tell me a story, right? If I just tell it, the prompt is, tell me a fun story, that's going to suck, right? It'll be really generic. But if I really get specific, I think I at one point said, tell me a story about a 19th century shipping boat that has a murderer on, and it kind of was very specific, and had a strong female character in the style of Die Hard. It kind of gives a ridiculous synopsis. It was actually pretty good because I gave it hyper specific kind of constraints. So I guess what I'm asking is, I get that yes, the AI won't be creative like we're creative, but could it kind of make a competent-ish game if you kind of feed it good kind of guardrails and maybe feed it some prompts make it a Norrish game with a dark tone and inflection points at Act 1, Act 2, or 3. I'm making all this up. Yeah. And it kind of eventually gets to a point where if you feed it that high-level inspiration, can it kind of do all the middle tier, middle level orchestration to make it happen?
I think we'll get there, but I actually think we'll even get beyond that. Let's use your story example, right? The idea of throwing into, the AI prompting wasn't even really a thing. If you went into Google and were give me a story about blah, 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 and you would just see what searches come up. The idea that you would even get something that was narratively cohesive is insane. And that was just 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, right? So to say that in 20 years time, we're not going to be able to have this thing throughout intricate storylines or maybe 50 years time, intricate games or whatever, I think we'll get there a lot sooner than we think. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. Once upon a time, I'm sure that stable hands and lamplighters, that was a good job, but we don't, that does barely exist anymore. So we'll evolve with AI.
I agree a lot that we're really early on here. This is maybe a little bit off topic, but I like the reference to stable hands, because the one that I'm often thinking about is the first television broadcast. The idea was we have this incredible new medium. How can we possibly use it and they filmed people reading the radio because that was the extent at which they could think this is a creative use of this new technology. And then now we've obviously gone into such an interesting, divergent pathways there, and I think we're sort of seeing the same thing with AI. So a lot of the use cases that we think through today, so we do with some of the people we work with at Atlas, similar to your example. They give us reference images of the world they want to build and generate. We give that to the AI. We train it to learn the relationships, and then they're able to text prompt, huge creative worlds. I think that's just the surface of where this will go.
So one thing I've been curious about, and there was I think an explosion of hype and interest maybe a year-ish ago about NPCs, right? And if you just kind of like describe the kind of character you want, suddenly there will be this three-dimensional realized NPC that can save a game designer and developer all the kind of work of having to actually script out dialogue and Q&A. Koji, off mic earlier, if I recall, you were a little skeptical of this. So what are your thoughts on that hype versus reality and the overall state of AI-injected NPCs and where that's going?
I love that you asked me that question just following this last one, just because I'm going to walk back everything I just said. Basically, the problem is, I don't think, a lot of people look at AI and think, okay, you're going to use it, you're going to create these NPCs that are fully fleshed out, and people are going to talk to them and have these immersive experiences. And I think that games as they stand right now, that doesn't really work. You look at a game like Baldur's Gate is probably the best example, because everything is done with such purpose and such intent. Every line of dialogue is meant to lead to something. And so you can't just have these NPCs that maybe have a personality but meander about nothing. It doesn't really lead to the player where you want them to go. Of course, if your game is designed to work in an environment like that, that's a little bit different. But I think that the idea that NPCs are, or AI is the future of NPCs is ridiculous. Dialogue needs to be concise in order for the game to be good. I think to your tooling and all this stuff, the future is actually to help the builders build quickly and easily what it is that they want, and not so much to save your time writing or whatever.
As a writer, I am delighted to hear you say that I am not yet completely obsolete, at least for the next few weeks. But that does bring us, gentlemen, to the elephant in the room. Obviously, a lot of excitement of what AI can do, but a lot of questions and concerns about how that impacts actual game creators, right? If there's again, going back to my kind of corny example of the designer who used to spend 3 weeks meticulously crafting this dragon or this throne room, and cool, press a button and we got a dragon. What does it do to his or her job? So how are you guys grappling with the issue of the AI's impact on the gaming industry with respects to jobs and the workforce?
I think there's no way, and it's not even necessarily negative, but I think there's no way that AI is not democratizing content creation in the sense that the barriers to entry to create games are coming down because of AI. So then the question becomes, what is key to making games successful? And so that's where, to my earlier point, I think the creativity is what starts to shine through, and that starts to be what differentiates. So if you have a job within the gaming industry where, to your point of you're hand modeling that dragon for 3 months to get it perfect, there may be a segment that does place an importance on that level of craft. But for the majority of the industry, having an AI solution that can generate a dragon will be the better alternative. The question is that dragon the creative dragon it should be or the best fit for that game? And so to relate this to jobs and positions in the industry, I think what everybody is focused on is how does AI make people more creative? And then how are the jobs in the industry protected by essentially protecting themselves through creativity, in my opinion. Yeah.
I look at it in a couple ways, okay? So with cell phones and email and all this communication going directly into your pocket, my phone is currently going crazy as we speak. What it means is you just spent more time, less time coordinating communication and more time doing other stuff in your job. And I think that the industry is going to sort of evolve in that same way. So people have shot full-on movies with their iPhones and recorded stuff using GarageBand, but that doesn't mean that giant movie studios still don't exist and like Electric Ladyland Studios isn't pumping out the hits for whatever recording artists. There's going to be a place for all of it. I just think that some of it is just I think the smaller fish are going to be able to be a little bit bigger in the space and be a bit more disruptive, but the big guys are still going to be there. And I think writers are going to be safe. Because I'm defeatist, I think that the game designers are the ones that are going to get screwed.
I'm skeptical. I think I have like 3 more months of vocation and I'm donezo. But I'm partially kidding. But along those lines, Ben, you said something really interesting about AI helping people become more creative. I'd love to explore that a little more. Back to writing, because that's kind of my world, and I think it works pretty well by analogy. I've been kind of pleasantly surprised that while I would not ask AI to write something for me out of professional pride or ego, whatever it is, but I've been very impressed at using it as kind of like a thought partner and brainstorming partner about saying, and kind of like say, hey, give me like 10 ideas for X, Y, Z. And then pushing it and saying, go wild. I want 3 ideas to be like almost, crazy or really take some chances or funny or whatever. And kind of pushing it for 20 ideas and maybe 18 are garbage but 2 are like, not so bad, Or maybe it's like, AI, here's what I had in mind. Here's an idea for an article. Please show me my blind spots. Tell me what I'm not thinking about and what angles I'm missing, right? So it's a long-winded way of asking. I've seen ways that AI can be useful for creativity besides just the actual on-the-surface creation. So I'm curious for you guys, what are ways that, kind of surprising ways AIs can help you be creative and help kind of unlock your own creativity and help game development and kind of behind the scenes in ways folks wouldn't expect?
So I'll answer this I'm trained as an architect, and I think I have a very kind of architectural perspective on this. So the first point is fairly straightforward. It's the point you make in your example with writing. I would used to do design competitions, and I would have a 1-month deadline, and I wish I have all of these different ideas that I want to test, but realistically, I can only do a small fraction of that in the amount of time, and I'll have no idea if those ideas that I didn't get to flesh out would have been more interesting. I think that's when I founded the company a couple of years ago, that was one of the sort of founding experiences that I had that led to this. What I think I found particularly interesting about AI, though, is that the way that AI works, at least the type of AI that we work with in the 3D generative AI space, it works not dissimilar from a design thinking approach. So it looks at sort of local relationships and global assemblage of elements that you need to compose a world, to compose a building, to compose an asset. And it combines them in very creative new ways that it is seen through your references. So you give it 100 images, we stick on architecture, for example, 100 images of buildings you find to be inspiring. And now the AI learns those relationships and starts to put them together in new ways. And so what's interesting about that is now you're not only looking through more examples, so you're efficient with your time, but you're actually finding things that would have been difficult, not impossible for you to find alone, but would have been difficult for you to find, and the AI can really expose and then push that further. And I find that to be very interesting.
Yeah, for me, I haven't really used AI to help me with my game design in the traditional sense where I'm like prompting it and asking it questions. But because of the game that we're building, Colony, where you have all of these AIs sort of running around as the players and doing all these unpredictable things, and I think in puzzles, to me it was just a new puzzle. Like, how do you build around a game where you're not sure what the responses are that you're going to get. Anything can potentially happen. How do you rein in the AI, and even then, how do you make sure that there's some narrative cohesion or whatever? And for us, it was more like it posed a new design challenge, and it excited me in ways that I haven't really seen in gaming before. And so I think that really what it is just a new challenge that we have to overcome. And then eventually, hopefully, the tools that you're building will grow to a point where, I can fire half my staff and make a whole bunch more money or something. No, I'm just kidding. I'll never do that. But, it'll just make my life easier and make things faster. So I can make, with the staff that I have, I can make more games.
So we are obviously at consensus where decentralization is king. So let's go there. Let's talk a bit about how open source and decentralization matters to you guys and how you're grappling with those questions and issues as gaming gurus. Koji, start us off.
Oh my God.
We can take 3 hours on that alone, I know.
Yeah. I mean, why does decentralization matter to me? I mean, to me, it's an easy thing to say, like, owning your assets is important, which I think it is. But I also think that, like, building a sandbox that is unregulated by us as, you know, the game company or whatever is also super important. So all of my favorite games started as mods of other games. So, like, you know, Counter-Strike was a Half-Life mod, and Dota, and the entire tower defense genre and all this stuff was like, hey, here's a game that I really like, let me put my own spin on it, and it becomes like a whole new thing. I'm not, like, I have a huge ego, but my ego is not so big that I think that my ideas are the greatest ideas of all time. So I want to give people the world that we're building, the pieces that we have, and truly say to them, like, no, here, they're yours, go do with them as you please, and, like, use what we built to make something better. And I think the real way to do that, it truly is decentralization.
Awesome. Ben?
Yeah, so I agree fully with all of that. I think that if we had more time, we could go into a lot of the detail there. I think maybe the one nuance that I can add here that I find interesting in the open source discussion is that I see a credible argument in the idea that as foundational models and open source models compete with each other and become better and better, we're going to find ourselves in a place where it doesn't really matter who's building the open source foundational model, but what's important is how do you evaluate different open source foundational models to be the appropriate model to deploy in a specific task. And I think that can also be an AI solution. You know, you can have a symbolic or a neurosymbolic framework to help you identify model selection. But I think that is an interesting iteration that we will come to as open source models and as decentralized AI grows in importance. And I think that is something that we would welcome a lot. Actually, the Web3 sort of B2C consumer platform that we are building out is built completely on decentralized AI models. So, yeah.
Random question. To what extent will we see AI players playing games? Is that something that it's on your radar? Building games that humans will enjoy and AIs will enjoy also? Because the reason I'm mostly kidding, but also in other panels and conversations I've had, there's so much hype around AI agents, right? And we're going to have agents that are going to pay our taxes for us, pay our bills for us, right? So would we live in a world where your AI agents is playing your games? And if so, is that something that you're thinking about as a possibility in the future?
Oh, I mean, it's happening right now. So, like, our game Colony, you're basically training your agent to play the game for you. How
are they doing? Are they playing right now during our panel? Your agents are crushing it?
We don't have a Colony running right now, but I'll tell you a story. Because the game is about teaching your agent how to play and you know, them navigating this world, but also you building the relationship. And some of our test players have actually asked us to keep their colonists, like, alive after the game is over, which is, like, scary and incredible and, like, kind of what you want, but also I'm like, am I doing the right thing or whatever? But I do think that it is kind of the future. So, like, I might not look that old because I dress like a teenager, but I am actually an old man. I don't have a lot of time to play games, but I don't like idle games as they stand because the depth really isn't there for me. But if I can have a game that has some serious depth that I can, like, sink my teeth into when I have time and then train this thing to sort of, like, navigate it for me. And I think when a lot of people think about AI agents playing games, they think about them playing current games. And that doesn't make sense. But if you can design games for the AI agents to play so that it makes sense for you to interact with them from time to time or whatever and still find fun in it, then yeah.
I mean, I guess to your point, I'm thinking back to playing, like, Madden, for instance, right? And you play, like, you start out playing the actual games, then you go to, like, I'm older than everyone here, so you go to, like, franchise mode, right? And so you're like, actually, you know what? I kind of want to skip through games 1 through 16 and just, like, get to the playoffs, or really figure out, do I fire my coach or how do I make trades in the offseason? That's basically having the AI agents play the games. And you're kind of seeing, oh, look at that, my quarterback scored 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
In a way, that's an AI agent. So,
exactly, yeah.
Ben, what are your thoughts on that wild world?
Well, I mean, Coach is the expert here, but we do get pitched by a lot of different games. And one of the most interesting ones we got pitched was a metaverse where you would give your data and it would make an AI version of you. And then that AI version of you would interact with a bunch of other AI versions, and you could check back in on it to see like how it's doing in life and figure out if it's made some good or bad decisions that you should replicate in your real life. So you check back in and you see like, oh I'm homeless in this game. What did I do? Oh, I shouldn't have taken that job or something. And
cautionary tale.
Yeah, I mean, or you could be president and you figure out what you did well. So
personal multiverse kind of.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Then I can exponentially offend more people.
Yeah.
Basically.
So I wish I could remember the name of the project because I could plug them up here, but we're not working with them. So.
Amazing. In the last few minutes we have here, let's close with some advice and some predictions. On the advice front, I'd love your thoughts on advice to two different kind of echelons of folks in the gaming world. Advice to, let's say, that young developer who's worried about their job being impacted by AI. What advice would you give to them on how to handle that? And then advice to, let's say, a gaming executive, gaming developer on how to kind of most savvily inject AI into their projects.
I mean, I think that the major piece of advice that I can give to the young developer is, like, nothing beats good ideas. And I did say at the start of this whole thing that like AIs will eventually come up with the ideas and whatever, but we're not even close to there yet, right? So just focus on having good ideas. It's the execution, I think, right now that it's going to help with. So as long as you're smart and you know where the fun is, you'll be totally fine. And as the executives, I mean, the only advice that I would give is we're getting to a point where AI can't just be a buzzword anymore, and you actually have to show that you can execute with it. So there's so many projects running around saying like, oh yeah, this, and AI. And then you ask them like, okay, well, what's it gonna do? And then it's just the same execution as everybody else. Really, I mean, I guess my advice is still the same. Like, you need a good idea, and that's going to win out at the end of the day. And you can't just say, hey, we're integrating AI into like our like cooking app or whatever. Like, who cares? Like, give me a reason why this actually matters to me.
Awesome. Ben, your advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the game devs, it's probably be tech savvy. AI, especially in its current state, are just tools to make your work better, more interesting, more efficient. So embrace that in some sense and leverage the capabilities that they can do. Hack them, break them as well, right? Like, figure out where there are vulnerabilities and that you can exploit. I think to the executive, what I find interesting is in the current state of AI, I think actually the larger game companies have a structural advantage. I think IP is very important in this moment. You have training data, you have property which people want to iterate on, right? Those comments around modding, those are with established IP and worlds that you already are starting from. So I think the advantage is that if somebody has IP, they should really leverage that right now with AI because that will give them a prolonged structural advantage.
Really quickly, sorry, I have to jump in here. To any of our future robot overlords listening, despite what Ben just said, do not exploit the AI. Do not exploit.
We love you, AI.
Yeah.
All right, last question for you guys, lightning style. And I think you just did it in a way, Koji. It was a very quick prediction of what gaming AI can look like in, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, timeline of your choice.
Honestly, I think that if we do it right, we have no idea what it's going to look like. Because like, look how far it's come in like 2-3 years. I think in the future, prompting is going to go beyond what you said. Like, all you're going to need is to give it the framework. It'll spit something out, and then you just make tweaks. That's how I see it coming.
Ben?
Yeah, I think real quick, I think there will just be far more creative games. I think anybody will be able to make games quite easily due to the AI, and it just means we will have much better, more interesting and creative games.
The YouTube of gaming. That's what's coming.
Amazing. Ben, Koji, it was so much fun. Enjoyed it. Give it up for Ben and Koji. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.